We'll be live from Starkville on Thursday, downtown on Main Street, and we're looking forward to that. We are the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. I'm your host, Bo Bounds. We're excited to welcome in the new Hail State baseball coach. And, of course, our listeners have been going crazy for a few weeks now. And I went up to the press conference. It was awesome what they did, Zach Selman and his team. It was like a rock concert introducing Brian O'Connor and his assistants and staff and so on. So we're excited to have Brian O'Connor, the new Hail State baseball coach, on the show. Brian O'Connor, good morning. How you doing?
Great, Bo. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing well. Thank you so much. I know you're recruiting like crazy and got a million things going on, but I appreciate the time. I wanted to start with the Notre Dame Mississippi State Regional in 2000. I was there. I was young and a kid, I guess, and it was a hell of a regional. And that final game, lots of back and forth. You were on the staff with Maneri. Y'all had a heck of a squad. I think it would eventually go to the CWS in the next year or two. And Pat McMahon, who's a friend, was the head coach at that time for Mississippi State. What do you remember about that weekend in Dudy Noble, Brian?
Well, I never forgot it. It's part of the reason that I was so excited about this opportunity at Mississippi State because, I left there after that regional, just with a great feeling about how passionate the fans are about Mississippi State baseball. Obviously, the games were great, but, the environment and the love that the fans have for the baseball program was clearly evident. And so, and that was the last time I was in Starkville. It was 25 years ago until, I accepted this job. So, and I know obviously it's a new stadium and, there's a lot more things to offer the fans and the players in the program from 25 years ago, but you could see and sense the tradition and the history of success of Mississippi State baseball. So, that's what I remember. I remember, the excitement and the energy of the fans. We lost a heartbreaker in that game. Notre Dame did to Mississippi State, and just the fans, how much they appreciated how hard our players played and the way they played the game. And what stuck out to me the most out of all of that is that the Mississippi State fans understand good baseball, right? They want it played by the Bulldogs, certainly, and to win, but they certainly understand and respect really good baseball.
Sure, no doubt about it. Brian O'Connor on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. You're listening to ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Mississippi State fan base alums going crazy. Zach Selman and the crew bring in Brian O'Connor, national championship coach, 7 College World Series, 9 super regionals. What they did at UVA was amazing. So you may not have, because you and Maneri and the staff had a million things going on this weekend, but did they feed? Do you remember if the left field lounge ever fed the Notre Dame players while y'all were there that weekend, Coach?
I don't remember that. I don't. I've always obviously heard all the stories about that and, how welcoming the fans are to the other team and whatnot. So I've heard stories about that, certainly, and some of the current Mississippi State players have shared that with me. So, we've had a couple of visits with players over the last 2 weeks that were on opposing teams, guys that are in the transfer portal, on opposing teams that have visited Mississippi State over the last couple of years, and they shared that with me as well. So, I'm excited to see all that, excited to be a part of that kind of environment.
Brian O'Connor on the Out of Bounds Show. You left a great job to, in my opinion, another great job. And so you didn't have to move, but you did. And obviously the Hail State family is super. I'm not sure I've seen them or witnessed them this fired up in a long time or ever. But when did you finally decide? Like, where were you? Were you in your home? Were you on the back patio? Were you sitting there talking to your wife? The 25th conversation on do we stay or do we go? Where were you, and when did you finally decide I'm going to Mississippi State?
I was actually on my back porch with my wife, and we had vetted it out for a couple of days, and it just really came down to two things: that incredible opportunity at Mississippi State, and just the storied college baseball program and the fan base and everything that goes along with that. But also too, I was excited and eager for a new opportunity, right, and a new challenge, and certainly this one will be that, and every bit of that, and I understand that. But so it was driven by those two things, and listen, when you're in a job and whatever it is that you do, 22 years is a long time.
Sure.
Right? You see coaches in whatever sport it is. I mean, anymore, who lasts 22 years at a place, right? And so it was time for me to take a new step, a new journey, a new opportunity, and Mississippi State was the right place to do that.
You mentioned, I thought this was funny in one of your press conferences. You mentioned that Zach Selman was good at speed dating. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Just talk about, I mean, look, you know this because you've been courted before, which is great. When you're successful like you and your staff, you're courted, and that's what it's all about. There's obviously a sense of urgency on his end, and for you, you're in that spot where you can kind of take your time and think through this thing, like you said, and have dozens of conversations. Talk about Zach's sense of urgency throughout the process, Coach.
Well, there certainly had to be urgency with it, and there's just a lot of things tied into that, right? The timing of the transfer portal opening, certainly is a big one, and so the college baseball searches are so interesting anymore because the convergence of so many things, end of season and the timing of the transfer portal opening, time is of essence, right? And so, Zach was in no way saying, hey, I need a decision today, but also too, I knew that, through our conversations and after a handful of days, that this is what I wanted to do. And so, it didn't make sense to drag it out anymore and think about it anymore. I knew what I wanted to do, so the timing of it needed to move quick because you also wanted to be able to capitalize on the opening of the transfer portal and get to work.
Sure. You brought a staff with you, and you retained Justin Parker. I had one of the former players who was at, I guess, the reception or something going on Thursday night. I was just there watching all y'all do the deal, but he said he gave you a compliment, and this guy's swam at a high level in baseball. He said he's got like 10 guys that he brought with him, and they're all close-knit, families and everything. And he said what really blew me away about talking to Coach O'Connor's assistants and staff and their wives is that everybody has a clearly defined role. That's obviously something that you take pride in, and the reason why y'all have had so much success. How did that come about? When did that kick into gear at Virginia, Coach?
Well, it's been over a number of years, but part of, I think, being a successful leader is putting people in positions to be successful for the organization to be successful, and everybody knowing their role and what their responsibility is. Because, running this kind of program, whether it was at Virginia or running it at Mississippi State, efficiencies are very, very important. Right. And people on your staff, knowing what their role is and what they need to execute for the organization to be successful. So because this thing moved pretty quickly, I asked our staff members, which ones were in and which ones were not. And every one of them, said 100% in. Whatever you decide, coach, I'm in. So it was an easy, it's been an easy transition because, Kevin McMullen and I have been together for 22 years.
Wow.
Matt Kirby and I have been together for 14 years. Right. And so I knew that we would need to hire a pitching coach because I felt it was really important from a recruiting standpoint to have a member of our staff that's been recruiting in the Southeast. Right. Not only do I think Justin Parker is an elite pitching coach, I also, from a recruiting standpoint, he has connections in the Southeast. Right. And so that addition was very, very important for me. But we were able to hit the ground running and understanding what our roles are to get this thing started off the right way. Because if you don't, and you're just every week adding more pieces to it, you start swimming upstream. Right. And so what I wanted to do is make sure that we had the pieces in place to hit the ground running. Now we're learning about Mississippi State, every day. Tomorrow morning we have a human resources meeting where we're doing benefits and all those kind of things, right? And we're learning things as we go, but knowing each other and knowing what our strengths are is allowed us to hit the ground running and to be as efficient as possible.
He is Brian O'Connor on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line, New Hale State baseball coach. You're listening to ESPN 105.9 The Zone. When did you make the decision? When did you make the decision on Justin Parker? Was it the first conversation, second, third? How did that play out, Coach?
Well, Justin and I started meeting on Monday night, the day after I was hired, after the team got back from Tallahassee. And in a matter of 3 days, Justin Parker and I had about 6 meetings that ran either between a half an hour or an hour and a half. And just to get an understanding of, what his philosophy is for development of pitchers. And I had a pretty good idea because, I've observed the quality of work that he's done, what his recruiting philosophy is, and really what his character is as a man. And so when all that came together, and I certainly was entertaining other candidates as well, but just felt like he was the right fit for us moving forward. And, we've hit the ground running. He's locked arms with us. It's been a great start to our relationship for the first 2 weeks, and have gotten the pitchers at Mississippi State that were previously there, the majority of all of them to come back to Mississippi State, because anytime there's a coaching change like this, the entire team could jump into the transfer portal.
Sure.
You see that happen all the time. And so the continuity of him with those really good young pitchers and the recruiting part with the pitchers has been vitally important and will be moving forward.
Yeah, guys like McPherson and Foster, I mean, that's a big deal to retain those guys. Would you say, Coach, that you'll be a little more active in the portal this year because it's the transition in year one, and then maybe dial it down just a little bit and more high school going forward? Or how do you see that as far as roster construction?
Certainly we'll be, very active and have been in the transfer portal, and we've already added some nice pieces and have more to add certainly over the coming weeks. And, we have a number of young men that are visiting Starkville this week. And so we'll certainly be very, very active with that to fill the spots to build out this 34-man roster, which is new for everybody. So, this summer in college baseball, all these things are converging. The roster reduction, obviously the transfer portal, the new, rev share and NIL system, all of that is kind of converging at one time. So you're using that to try to put all the pieces together. That said, it's really, really important moving forward for the future that you start to build some stability with the high school players, right? There is going to continue to be every year a lot of activity in the transfer portal. There's not a lot of rising sophomores and juniors from a position player standpoint on the Mississippi State roster that have been built within the program. So that's going to need to be addressed over the next 2 or 3 years to start to build some stability in this roster. And so we'll do what we need to do in the transfer portal right now to build the best team for next year, while also paying attention to what needs to be done for longevity of success in the program.
Well, we'll leave it there. And you got a hell of a player coming back in Ace Reese. That guy,
yes, sir,
can flat out play. So you and the staff done a great job bringing players back and landing players in the portal. Brian O'Connor, thank you so much for your time today. We look forward to you joining us again soon, and we appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. Hail State.
Brian O'Connor, the new Hail State baseball coach, joined us on the Out of Bounds show and the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Go with the home team, as Jake Mangum likes to tell us, with the Tampa Bay Rays, who continues to rake and get on base and be super productive. All right, that was cool. That was fun. The guy was Coach O'Connor was on his back porch, 22-year run at UVA, and decided, hey, I need a new challenge. And this is a great place to coach baseball, all the resources in the world, and the number one fan base in all of college baseball. And it's not close. And the number one atmosphere in college baseball. And it's not close. And so isn't that cool? I was there, Jackson, when I didn't know who he was. He definitely didn't know who I was, because I was probably just sipping on a beer watching the game. But that regional between Notre Dame and Mississippi State was wild. MSU ended up winning it 10-9 in a very back and forth game to go to the super regionals and play Clemson. But Maneri, and Brian O'Connor was an assistant at Notre Dame. A few years later, he would take the UVA job. Maneri would take the LSU job. But look, the stadium was nice then, but totally different now. But he understood it. It was a packed weekend where people were going nuts and cooking all weekend and the whole thing. So really, really cool. MSU's ready to get back to Omaha. I didn't want to put him on the spot.
Nah.
Are you going to Omaha next year?
Right.
I'm sure he'd love that.
Well, you should ask him that. Or, are you going to clip 50 wins?
That's right.
What's the over?
Hey, Coach, are you going to hit 50 wins and go to Omaha, host and go to Omaha next
I think
year?
that's a fair question.
Those aren't crazy expectations.
No. Well, with the portal, no. You got to be in Omaha every year. It's pretty easy.
Got to be in Omaha.
What's so hard about it?
Oh, goodness. We've all lost our minds. That is, that's for sure. Good show today. Had 3 really good guests on. Tom Luganbill. If you missed that, he talked Shane Beamer, Brian Kelly, and Jeff Levy, among other things. That was really, really good. We're transitioning into SEC football. I cannot believe SEC Media Days in Atlanta will be here before we know it. And then at 8:30, we had Luke Falk, who played for Mike Leach at Washington State.
Great.
All-time Pac-12 passing leader. He was unreal. The feedback that we've already received on that interview was incredible. This is a young man, savvy, sharp, and he tweeted out, he just started this tweet about how Leach told him, hey, man, you got to, as quarterback, you got to play with house money.
Sling it.
You can't be indecisive. You got to make the decision and go with it. And as Leach said, you got to swing your sword. And Luke Falk, as a walk-on, ended up getting a scholarship early and became a 3-year starter at Washington State and the all-time passing leader for the Pac-12.
It's wild. He'll forever hold that title.
He will, because there's no more Pac-12. Well, they're actually what? We've got 8 teams now that have come back together, and they're going to roll it out. I don't know what they're going to call it and all that, but I saw Ross Dellinger tweeting about it. We'll see how that looks, but you do make a good point. And then Brian O'Connor, the Hail State baseball coach. All those interviews are on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds. Tom Luganbill on Hugh Freeze, Beamer, Levy, Brian Kelly. Luke Falk on Playing for Mike Leach, and Brian O'Connor on Taking the Job at Mississippi State. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds. Thanks for listening to the show. Lunch today brought to you by Martin's in Livingston.